Welcome to Second Take, the show that takes a look at the issues behind the news. Some big changes are on the way for South Africa's electricity market. Terence Creamer joins me to discuss what's in store. Hi, Terence.
Hi, Chanel.
These changes are linked to the Electricity Regulation Amendment Act and long-standing policy.
Yes, since 1998 we had that white paper that never really got implemented. That basically set in motion a desire or an aspiration that South Africa move to a more competitive electricity market. For over 100 years, I think it's 102 years of Eskom's existence, it's been a vertically integrated market dominated by a single monopoly business. And in 1998 we said, no, we would like to have competition in generation. Even back then we said that the wires business would stay a sort of a state monopoly, and then distribution was already sort of in South African context, the municipalities already had a big role. And we know that's become a bit of a weak link in the system, but there's many municipal distributors, and then Eskom also plays a direct role in distribution as well. So that was going to be some reform there, which we tried to do, but it didn't work out. And so we've had a sort of a stop-start approach to this. But the Electricity Regulation Amendment Act, which was sort of passed by lawmakers last year, came into force earlier this year, really sets in motion those big changes in the industry. Basically insists on an unbundled market, so we're going to unbundle Eskom into those various components I spoke about. And in generation, it insists on a competitive market. It also talks about separating the wires business into a transmission system operator, and it's given a 5-year grace period for the industry to undertake that separation, and that's where we're at the moment. We're sort of in the process of implementing this Electricity Regulation Amendment Act.
We've already seen the vertical separation of the transmission business from the rest of Eskom.
That's correct. That was a big development, and it was happening at a time when Eskom had many balls in the air. We had load shedding, very intense. So they were undergoing this massive restructuring, which really comes from a policy document around state-owned companies when there was still a Department of Public Enterprises that's now fallen under the presidency at the moment, and that we've got sort of the electricity minister really having oversight over Eskom. But the policy is that we need this vertical separation to happen. So we've had this legal separation now of NTCSA, the National Transmission Company South Africa. It has its own independent board, but it's still a wholly owned subsidiary of Eskom. So as I mentioned earlier, there's a view that by over a 5-year period, this needs to be extracted from Eskom and become a transmission system operator, totally independent of Eskom. And that's to level the playing fields. At the moment, we've got this monopoly business that still has some of those monopoly trays, and we see them raising their head every now and then. But so if you want IPPs and the legacy Eskom generation to truly be on a competitive footing, you need to have the transmission and system operator being totally independent, and that is the process we are undergoing now. There are signs of that independence, but there's also signs of the monopoly. So we're sort of in this grey, no man's land at the moment, grey area, but we're starting to see the sort of green shoots of this competitive market starting to emerge.
The NTCSA is also expected to become the market operator.
Yes, so in this 5-year transition, we're going to start operating markets. We've seen something of these markets already in play because we've seen IPPs coming, but it's all purchased through a central buying office of Eskom. So this is going to be there's going to be a market platform, and we're going to start setting that up. And there's been a lot of work over the last year, really run by the NTCSA. They've taken the lead to canvass the rules of the game, so what they have called a market code. And they've had over 10 hybrid workshops around the country looking at what should the rules of the game be. That has sort of been packaged into a final draft now. It's going to be another meeting this month to sort of tie up loose ends. But the custodian of that will be the regulator. So it has to now go to the regulator. and the regulator has to apply its mind to that framework. Is it a good framework? CSA spoke to lawmakers this week. They believe it is a good product, but the regulator will have to apply its mind. The regulator also needs to do public hearings around this, I imagine, possibly also around the market codes, definitely around the market codes as well, whether that will be done simultaneously or two separate processes, because they need to license the market operator as well. So there's a lot to happen. But they've set an aspirational start for this platform, of trading platform, for April 1 next year, which is very little time, given what I was saying, that the regulatory sort of gates that need to be opened to get there. But be that as it may, there's this sort of line in the sand. Let's hopefully get this market platform operating. Internally within Eskom, for a number of years, they've been running sort of a market. So all the power stations bid in daily into that market. It's not been visible to the rest of us. Visibility is going to start now happening, because they're wanting to start putting these IPPs that are existing in the system into this market. There's different levels to this. There's like there's a day ahead market that you bid into. There's an intraday market that you can bid into. There's a capacity market. So there's a number of balancing markets, a number of markets, but within this sort of platform that people will start bidding into. And so the idea, it's a major change, and the idea is that we start operating this soon. There's going to be an educational process underway, a market sort of school starting at Wits Business School in July, that people are going to be able to have visibility of this. A simulation tool has been developed around this market, and there's going to be physical events where people are exposed to this trading. Again, it's going to start as a voluntary market, and we'll see how it evolves over the coming 5 years as we transition to this fully competitive system that we've been aspiring to since all the way back in 1998.
What does all of this mean for the electricity sector?
It's a major change. So we've seen change. It's not like there haven't been changes in the electricity system. We've got IPPs now. We've got rooftop solar generators. We've got a separated NTCSA. We've got wheeling contracts in place. These are all fairly new for South Africa. They're not new for the rest of the world, but we've had this tradition of a very centralized system. We also see technologies enabling a much more distributed system through solar and wind, for instance. So we are in for a major change. In fact, the NTCSA briefing led by Andrew Etzinger in Parliament this week, saying this is the biggest change in the 102-year history of that market that we've become used to. So it's major. It's going to ultimately lead to where you have choice. So this is a wholesale market, but at the retail level, you're going to have choice of your provider. Think a little bit, what we've seen in the sort of cell phone industry, where you have multiple providers and products offered. That's the sort of thing that we think is going to start evolving in the electricity sector. But these are long life assets. We can't disrupt. We know we're coming out of a very intense period of load shedding. So it's going to be learning by doing in some ways, and voluntary at the start. So as we learn, I imagine the market code may have to change. The structure is definitely going to have to change. But the big next step will be this launch of the market platform, and then this full separation of the transmission system operator from Eskom, what was a vertically integrated monopoly, to really set in motion the levelling of the playing fields and trying to bring in the benefits of competitive pressure, hopefully ultimately to all of us consumers, that we start seeing the benefits of competition coming through in the way, maybe not in the way that tariffs might not fall ever, but we might see the pace and the rate at which tariffs are increasing hopefully come under much more of a market discipline.
Thank you. That's the Second Take Show for this week. Thank you for watching, and join us again next time for more news analysis. Also, don't forget to listen to the audio version of our Engineering News Daily email newsletter.